All right, everybody, welcome to the Gaslit Truth Podcast. I'm Therapist Jenn here with Dr. Teralyn. It is a Friday right now in the
All day.
morning when we are recording this. And I just want everybody to know the struggle is really fucking real this morning for us.
It is. It's an overthink Friday, but we're trying to figure out how to start the show today. So,
This big, huge production team that we have in the background that tells us how to do stuff, they are on holiday today. So we're going to wing it. But before we talk about our guest and what we're going to talk about today, we got to talk about Dr. Teralyn's book that she wrote because she's kind of a big deal.
She's got her book up too.
Oh,
If you want to
yeah.
see the jacket, there you go. So
There it is.
Your Best Brain book is available on Amazon. And if you want to learn how to change your brain and change your life, this is the book for you. And so in the spirit of today's episode, I am going to refer everyone to chapter 2, which is called Change is Coming.
One moment. Hang on.
Yes, one
Okay,
moment, page 17.
Okay, following along.
Yep. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. And so we're going to be talking about change. We're specifically going to be talking about changes that need to be happening in the mental health system with our special guest. So
yeah, we are.
With that in mind, you've been gaslit into believing the mental health space will help you thrive.
Ooh.
We are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Teralyn and Therapist Jenn, and this is the Gaslit Truth Podcast, and we have a special guest today, and I'm going to bring her in right now.
She's coming. There she is. Oh, slide.
She's coming.
You put her back. She's coming.
Wait,
for those of you watching this on YouTube, I'm telling you, we are trying really hard.
She's here.
We're trying so hard today. There she is. All right, Terry, you tell us who this woman is and why she's so awesome.
So, yes. So the first thing I want to say is I found her on TikTok one day scrolling through, and I was like, who is this person talking about mental health in all the ways I wish every mental health practitioner would talk about mental health? Please welcome to the show, RaQuel Hopkins.
Yay, I feel like we're supposed to be like, the energy this morning from you guys is just it just has me pumped. So
I am pumped because whenever we come across
some of everything going on, this is my type of people.
Thank you.
All right.
Welcome to the fold. Welcome to the fold, RaQuel. So RaQuel is a wife, mom, and HR professional. That's interesting. Did not know that. Entrepreneur and therapist. So basically everything. Who refers to herself as the Capacity Expert on her social media platforms. And she is a disruptor in the mental health space. And she is in the right place today to talk about that.
Oh, I love it.
And calls out how the industry, the mental health industry, keeps people stuck in cycles of managing symptoms and coping rather than thriving. And I cannot wait for this conversation. Welcome, RaQuel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I love it. I love the word disruptor. That to me is, I wish that I'm like, she's got to come on. Like,
yes.
I love that. I love that word. I'm like, I should have used that word in some of my stuff. Like, such a good word. I love it. Right. And that's really what we're talking about today, right? Is we are gaslit. The world is gaslit into believing that this mental health space, which we are all in, for everyone that's listening, we're all therapists sitting on this conversation here, right? You're led to believe that space is actually going to help you thrive, which is not accurate all the time, is it, RaQuel?
It's not at all. I always tell people that the work happens outside in the streets anyway. Like, if you're really going to grow, you need to get outside in the streets. It doesn't necessarily happen in session per se.
That's true. So I need to know, this is just so my mind can have this framework. You are HR professional and therapist. Which came first?
HR.
And so how long have you been in the therapist space, and why did you get from there to there?
So peak of my career, I was working as VP of HR for a global telecommunications company. And that was back in 2019. I started making a transition, and I went into, I attended a coaching program, and I absolutely loved it. I've always enjoyed working with people, but I was kind of over like the business / people aspect, because at the time I didn't have the capacity to navigate both. And it's like, oh, people here and then business here. And I didn't really know how to merge the two. So when I got into coaching, I was like, I don't know if I'm going back into HR, but if I do go back into HR, I had dealt with so many people issues that I was like, maybe, well, let me tell the truth, because I'm not going to gaslight you guys on your own podcast.
Please don't.
Better not. Like,
I'm like, let me not lie. Let me tell let me. I was trying to summarize it. So the truth is,
lightning bolts will come down, just so you're
Yeah.
aware. So no
not
fuckery here.
I was not thinking about going back into the HR space. So I was like, well, I don't know what coaching looks like, because coaching was still fairly new. A lot of people weren't talking about it. Organizations weren't really talking about coaching back in 2019. So I felt like I need a backup plan. And I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do with my life from there. So I always tell people, when I can't figure out my life, I have educrastination. So if I'm studying or reading and it's not a continuing education, I do not know what's next. So I went back to school and I got a second master's in clinical and mental health counseling. Not because I wanted to be a therapist, though, because the other thing is, I was used to living a certain lifestyle too. I wanted to be able to create a path for myself, but I felt like the mental health would really complement my background, and the conversations were becoming more and more and more. And then when I got in the program, I was like, what the heck is this? In terms of what was being taught versus how I was interpreting the information from the textbooks, and then paying attention to what mainstream media was saying. So I guess I started the program in 2020. I graduated it in 2022. I decided not to get my license because at the time I was then working at a software development company, and I had a portfolio of leaders, and my role was 270 people. You are supposed to help them develop their capabilities. Well, they were acquired. I didn't want to do traditional HR work per se, because I enjoyed the people development aspect. So I was like, well, I guess I'll go back and take the state exam and become a therapist. And shit, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, again, school again. Let me go take a test. I'll take a test. I took the test. I passed it. And I was like, well, let me figure out what I'm going to do. And that's how I got here, not because I wanted to be a therapist. So when they try to gaslight me on social media, I'm like, I never wanted to be a therapist anyway. I'm just using the title because people listen to experts apparently these days.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I just want to say welcome to the fold one more time, because Jen and I, we talk about the how we got here to being therapists and whatever, and everyone expects this squishy story of self-awareness, or I met a therapist once that changed my life.
I wanted to help people.
I wanted to help. None of that. None of that is true. None of that.
I don't even like people that much. It sounds really fucked up because I'm a therapist. But I don't really like them that much.
I just wanted to keep a business.
Those are the best therapists, the ones that really don't like people. That sounds like you. Because I have a green room where I'm like, here, I'm compassionate, and then in my head, I'm like, what did you just say? Like, why? Those are the best people. I think those are the best therapists ever.
Terry's trying to build a business, right? Like your start was business building. And I just wanted to be Clarice from Silence of the Lambs and work in a prison and know people's brains. And so neither of us really care so much about being martyrs and helping people.
And I think we need more of that.
Here's to your point, RaQuel, when you talked about Terry and I deal with this a lot. I think Terry even more so than I do because she has her doctorate and I don't have my doctorate, right? But people will pull her apart. But it's like a split space. People will pull you apart because you're a doctor and how could you say these things? But at the same time, people will listen to you because you have your doctorate. So it's like this weird.
I got a third one though. I got a third
one. Okay.
Yeah. The last one is, if people don't like what I'm saying, they'll say, but you're not a real doctor, to basically diminish, what I've been saying. So it's very fascinating. And if you guys haven't run across her, TikTok, because is that where you were on first? Were you, or was it
TikTok? And then Instagram has.
One moment, just putting my doctor coat on. There you go. How's that looking here? Okay. Oh, my doctor coat on. One moment. There you go.
In a world where you can be whoever you want to be.
That's right. That's right.
See this? Wait, can you see that? Can you see that, Raquel? Not an MD.
Not an MD.
Wear that shit, girl.
Not an MD. I see that.
Yeah.
MD. You might want to get you one of these. Feels real good. Okay, carry on.
All right.
Oh,
So
God.
some of the stuff, if you guys haven't checked out her TikTok, I think it was the very first video that I saw, I sent to Jen immediately and I said, I want her on the podcast. And she goes, reach out. And I was like,
Yep.
man, to get another therapist that is kind of blowing the lid off of traditional mental health. And you just said it now, like when you were in school taking these classes, you had enough critical thought at that point,
Mm-hmm.
because you'd been in the real world working
Yeah.
with real people and real problems in HR. You had enough critical thinking to be like, what is this bullshit that we are being sold in the school? Like, seriously. But there's so many people that just kind of lockstep their way right into, all this. And I just saw a post that you had done on CBT, and
Mhm.
just be like, this is not the end all be all of everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, what did it feel like for you to be in that space? Because I'm going to guess that you may have been the lone wolf essentially in this space of learning, like, what is this? What was that like for you?
I struggle. I struggled tremendously, so much so that in the classrooms, I became the person that was just challenging thought just to challenge, but it really didn't make any sense to me. Especially, so let me go back a little. I remember in undergrad, right, when you had older people coming back because now they had raised the kids and now they wanted to
Yep.
focus. I'm like, why are those people take life so seriously? Like, what's your deal? And then I became that person, right? When I went and got my master's, so I'm reading every textbook and I'm like, well, this definition of mental health doesn't align with what we're talking about in the course. Like,
Mhm.
and what we're putting out in mainstream. So it was really, really hard for me. And then just like basic concepts, like I'll give you one that really bothered me as a Black woman, because everybody within my community is now going to therapy, right? Which I think is great. I think it's great. I believe in therapy wholeheartedly, but the data, right? When you present someone data, like correlation doesn't equate to causation. And if you're only pulling data from places with low socioeconomic status, it doesn't pull the RaQuels and those of the worlds. And I think that data has the ability to create a sense of inferiority. So like all of that stuff for me was just like a lot. And I'm like, okay, this is a social science. You have to be okay with complexity. I remember listening to conversations, like I would see stuff on social media and I would say, where did people get this information from? Because we learn about human development, right? We learn that there are pros and cons to a two-parent household versus a single, but nothing ever says that this is bad, this is dysfunctional, this makes
Yeah.
this wrong. And somehow we've taken that thought process of understanding humans to have these matter of fact conversations to where everything about being human is now pathologized. And I'm like, I don't know which way to go because this is insane.
Well,
I when you're talking, the first thing I think about is, and I don't know your opinion on this, so I might be throwing something out that has come from this world that you like, but I think of that fucking ACE score. I think of that right away. And all of the people that I meet with who are like, I've had the ACEs assessment done and my ACE score is so high, and therefore, and they have already in their brain, they're fucked. They're never going to get through what they've got in life. Everything is pathologized because of the fact that I have been through traumas, because of my socioeconomic status, because of my one parent household, because I have a parent who is in prison, blah, 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 blah. And they come, and this has siloed them into pathology because
Yeah.
of something like
and
that.
hopelessness. And
Yep.
hopelessness.
Yep.
Hopelessness, right? And
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
because I'm like, how do we have all of this awareness around mental health, but the numbers keep rising with mental illnesses and all? I'm like, that just doesn't make sense.
It
Even
doesn't.
just like down to the basics in terms of how we use mental health versus mental illness, right? I'm like, we all have mental health. When people say like, I can't think of statements right now off the top of my head, but I'm like, we all have mental health. We don't all have mental illness. We could all live with one if we put depression, in that same, but we all have mental health. What are we talking about? Like, mental health is a tool. It's a vehicle that you use. There are seasons where you may have to protect it, but that's not a space that you want to stay in long term, because very basic words, how you think, feel, and function. That's what your mental health is. And if you're protecting those things, like, do you want to stay thinking the same, feeling the same, functioning the same way when everything around you is constantly changing? And in my mind, I can't remember. I saw a definition in the program and it said optimization. It was within the word mental health. And I was like, optimization? Well, I clearly have cut everybody off in my life. Like, I'm trying to move away from jobs. I hate people at this point. Like, I don't think I can optimize like in a bubble. Like, I was like, oh shoot. So I got it wrong too, because I have become the queen of protect your peace, protect your mental health, no new friends. But I was silently suffering in a lot of ways too, because I hadn't learned how to navigate life or build a capacity to navigate like a sense of complexity and just people and what it means to be human. So, and then it was another thing, because there are a few things that stood out to me, and I was like, it was like, well, mental health experts are not experts in mental health. And I was like, well, what the fuck are we there? And then like following that, it said, well, mental health care is not supposed to create dependence. I was like, well, what are we experts in then? Helping people navigate transitory issues that have the ability to plague their mental health. And I was like, oh, that's just life in general. If you move, you go to college, your kid goes from second grade to third grade, you get divorced, you get married. Those are the things that we help people, because we know that at some point you're going to struggle with your mental health by its very nature of you being human.
Yes.
Like, why did we destigmatize mental health? Why is there shame around mental health if you just take the basic terminology of what the word means? We were supposed to destigmatize struggle, like the challenges that you would have. We were supposed to destigmatize things that actually should have shame around it. The word mental health, there should be no shame around it, because no one does not have mental health.
Right. Yeah. That's yeah. So, and I know you get flack, right? Like on your, I thought you could share with us the biggest area that you seem to get a bunch of flack on your socials for is when I know, because there's a few.
Like, pick one.
I know. Right? I was like, I should have prepared you with this question. Like, pick the one thing that people keep like poking at you for. And what you're saying, you've talked about this before too, because it's this idea of mental health is just mental health by the nature of being a human and living and interacting with your environment at all. Like any interaction you have, right? There's going to be likely some kind of mental health reaction that you have, right? So I know you've talked about this, but I'm just curious to know if that's something that you get a lot of flack for, or there's another area that's even bigger on your social.
So I said that gaslighting was normal.
Okay.
And people did not respond to that well.
Can you give some context, RaQuel? Can you give some context to what you were talking about during that?
Yes. So people are going to lie, cheat, steal, just do all of them. That's what makes us
manipulate.
Human, right? Yeah, manipulate. Like your kids manipulate, right? They will manipulate you, right?
And we manipulate them right back.
You can. My 10-year-old tries to gaslight me at least once a week, right? Like,
oh, that's it? Wow, good for you.
At least once.
My 11-year-old does it
whether it's
multiple
my
times.
stomach hurts. Like some of the things that we're doing today, people have always done. We just have not had terminology for it. And I think the terminology is great, right? Because it's a tool. It gives us a sense of understanding. But like when people say people intentionally do it, no. So that was one. Gaslighting is normal. And people were like, well, you're victim shaming people. I'm not victim shaming people. We all have been gaslit. And to think that you're not going to be gaslit, to me, is gaslighting within itself. Because why would you do that to yourself, to think that you're exempt from experiencing what it means to be human and for other people to walk and go through their journeys? Like, people are going to manipulate you, whether it's intentional or not. It doesn't really matter, because you cannot tell me that my truth is not my truth. Like, unless I still have some work to do, whether it's to build my confidence, self-trust, my self-esteem is low. So I try to get people to focus more so on your internal world, because again, I always say that they're universal truths. Like, people cannot do what you do not allow them to do. So let's take ownership for the things that we do allow people to do. And then we won't be so upset or like have this chip on our shoulder for people doing things that are expected. Now, whether it's right or wrong, if someone intentionally, and then they will go to the extreme, they will say, well, what do you say if someone like tries to like run you over with a car? Like, who? I didn't.
Does that happen on the regular? Like,
I would consider that abnormal. Then we can probably talk about traumatic. Like, like, to me, like, we have to bring
they bring in extremes.
Sense.
They do.
It's the extremes. And the other one is narcissism, right? Everybody is narcissistic. I think that we all have narcissistic traits because
we did a whole episode on that one. And I went through the whole DSM, and I'm a narcissist. For sure. Like, that's
my thinking with that is, right, let's just say someone really has like NPD, right? Like, if you knew it, or if you even if you're in a relationship with someone and you really like, they are narcissistic. There are two pieces to that. Like, I don't hear people say that I survived someone that lived with depression or schizophrenia, because if you actually deal with someone that lives with like clinical depression or schizophrenia, it feels, whether intentional or not, it feels like they do it on purpose sometimes, because you're human too. Like, it can emotionally and psychologically cause a lot of damage. So I was bringing the awareness that let's stop creating these separations between mental illnesses, because we don't get to control how people respond to them. And from a narcissistic standpoint, what do you expect from someone? If you're saying that I have NPD, you actually expect me to have empathy for you? Do you expect, like, I just don't understand that. Like, it sucks that you've had that experience. It sucks that people are willing to intentionally do things. I understand those things, but will we continue? Because we all can be victimized, but you don't have to stay a victim. And that was what I was calling out. I'm never saying that abuse is okay. I'm never saying that it's okay for someone to abuse you emotionally, psychologically, and definitely not physically, but you cannot be on this earth and not experience emotional or psychological abuse. I just do not think that is possible. When your kids even tell you that, like, you're the worst mom in the world, that is emotional and psychological abuse, depending on how strong your foundation is in terms of, do you trust yourself as a mom? Do you believe in how you show up every day? Like, you can't escape those things. So I get worked up because I love talking about this stuff, because I'm like, this is a lot of bullshit that we're talking about.
It is. I want to add in something here too. Actually, two things. People with mental health issues can be just as manipulative as people who don't, or mental illness. Like, there is that feels all inclusive, but there can be a big level of manipulation that happens within that population. And I think that gets denied a lot too. Like, oh, you're saying someone with depression manipulates? 100%.
100%.
100%. They have to, like, we have to keep our world going in that way until you decide not to. The second thing I wanted to bring up is a really good friend of mine made a video just the other day about narcissistic stuff, and she said, to me it was dead on. And she goes, if you are on social media talking about how your partner was a narcissist, your partner was not a narcissist, because your partner would never allow you to be on social media talking about how much of a narcissist they are. And I was like, because she goes, they would be all over you. Like, you would much so you would not say a word, about this. And I was like, man, is that not the truth? And I was like, wow. So all these people on here, narcissist. And she's like, you wouldn't be doing that if they were actually a narcissist. Now, could they be a real shit human? Of course. Of course they could. Of course. Could your experience with that person be different than the experience that person has with someone else? 100%. So it just, to me, it was interesting, because that whole narcissist thing is, I'm tired of that.
Gosh, I'm tired
it's so
too.
exhausting.
people are tagging me with like, you're not the expert in narcissism. I'm like, they're not even real classes to be like, like real teachings to become.
There's
People
not.
think that's
any
the
of
thing,
this stuff.
though.
Like,
They do. They think that we learned some of these
and
crazy.
you don't. Like, you don't. You learn some of all of it for awareness, but there's no official certification for becoming
Listen,
an
they're
ED.
too busy filling us with useless shit about people getting railroad spikes through their brains and severing their corpus callosum. Like, this is the useless shit that we learned. We didn't actually get full courses on narcissism or
You did
antisocial
not.
behavior or what cluster B used to be. And that's all we became experts in. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a thing. Like,
Maybe the doctor did. Did you, doctor?
yeah,
I did not.
She did
Jen
not.
and I got virtually the same training. The only training we got in NPD was trial by fire because we worked in the prison. So that was the only real
That was probably
training.
the realest
Yeah,
training because there
on
were
the job.
actual, yes, like
There were
that
actual
3% of
people.
people in the
Mhm.
world that really truly have narcissism. We got to meet some of them. Like,
Mm.
Oh
so
yeah.
yes, we did.
Mhm. And it was all. But if you
Lights
don't
us
have
lots
extreme
of, yeah.
training like that,
No, no,
if
we
you
were like,
don't,
oh, let's become experts in psychopathology. Ooh, that looks like fun
yes,
because we were.
says nobody ever.
Says nobody ever except us because
Right.
right, like,
Yeah, well, and same thing with any personality disorders. I mean,
so
there should
I
be specialized training for that, but there's really not until
Not.
later. But I want to bring in one more thing because I don't know if this was your experience, but I didn't learn how to diagnose people until I was being clinically supervised. There wasn't a class for us on how to specifically diagnose anyone, even when in my PhD, when I was taking classes on uh, testing, right? It wasn't a here's how you diagnose. It was here's the results of the test. Now go look for the diagnosis. And I was like, so I don't know if that was your experience, but I'm thinking like, go ahead.
It was this course, abnormal versus normal, and I had a really great professor. You always get hit or miss.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that stood out, because she talked a lot about the DSM, and she used to say that because I'm not anti the DSM. I love a good framework, right? And framework in the sense of, because you had 3 bad days does not mean that you're depressed, right? And if
Right.
you look at the
yeah.
DSM, it does offer some form of structure. And she used to say you really want to pay attention to how many symptoms they say, like what the time frame is. And I think that people have just X those things out. So she didn't necessarily teach how to diagnose, but she brung that to your awareness that you want to pay attention to the time frames. You want to pay attention to the symptoms, because it's easy for us to default and say that we have something or to adopt a label. So that helped me to be more mindful in terms of what I was looking for. But we also know that the rules are different everywhere, right? Like in Texas, we can diagnose you, and then in other states you can't diagnose. So there's the requirements across the board in different states are just so wacky and all over the place that you just know what you're getting in general. So
Right.
that was my experience.
Yeah, and that's interesting, and I wanna bring this up too because so many people talk about I'm just gonna say depression, right? And so they're like, "I have depression." And I wanna offer this to people, that's not a clinical diagnosis. Every person has depression, every person goes through depressive states. The clinical diagnosis would be major depressive disorder. There's no depression as a diagnosis in the DSM. There just isn't. But
There just
yet,
isn't.
right, but all treatment is basically for major depressive disorder, which the majority of people don't have, And so even when people talk about medications and the over medicating of the American society, which is I believe to be very true, um they argue with me like these save lives for those that are seriously depressed and whatever, and I'm like, but most people just have depression, which is not even a diagnosable condition. It's major depressive disorder if we're splitting hairs here. And I think that happens a lot because of psychological speak, right?
Yeah,
Like we have so
because
much
it's a
psychological speak.
consecutive. It's consecutive. Like I can
Yep.
have 4 or 5 bad days, and then
Yeah.
my kid wins his soccer tournament, and then I'm riding off a high for 3 days because we're
Yeah.
just excited. And then before you know it, the reset, the cycle starts over. And that was the piece. It's the consecutive time frame
Yep.
that people tend to
Right.
miss.
It takes a lot of work and time to, as a therapist or as a, like, I'm going to say a prescriber of any sorts too. We're all giving diagnoses, right? The story matters, and not the most immediate recent story, but the whole story matters. But it takes time to figure out that story. It's not a quick 20 minutes or I meet you once, I give you a couple assessments and I know that whole story. It actually takes quite some time to get to know that, which I think is great when you see people that spend, I mean, they can be meeting with people for months and months and months and months as practitioners, and they still have these like kind of general diagnoses on there, because it's like to slap something on there that says bipolar or says major depression, you've got to really make sure that you've got that history there to back it and understand it.
Lie too. That's the other
Well,
thing.
they lie and like,
No, they don't. Didn't we just
hey,
go over
now
that a second
here's
ago?
okay, but here's the thing that when you say, when we our hook to everybody today is you've been gaslight into believing that the mental health space will help you thrive. Can you tell us from your lens, because this is a lot of the platform that you stand on, what do you see that's happening, or what's the thing you don't do in your practice to stop creating these forever consumers, these people that stay in therapy forever? Because we are in very powerful positions with how we present this. And I believe that people come to us like thinking that this space that we're in is really going to help you thrive and it's going to work forever, but you could keep people in this space
I think that's so
forever.
unethical. Like
Yeah,
people
you
will say
could.
the conversation that we're having as professionals that is unethical, but to create a sense of dependency on me as a professional, that is unethical. One, I don't want to talk to you. Like I have my own friends. Like I do. I know how to build a community because I've used these resources in a great way to where I don't want all of my clients to be my friends. Like, and I love my clients. Like I really do, because it's hard to not, you hear all of a person's life, like you like them, but I have the ability to move on. Like nothing lasts forever. So for me, it's upfront. Like the goal is to position you to live independently and autonomously on your own. That doesn't mean that you may not ever return. That does not mean that like I or someone else will not be here for you, but it is not to keep you in here for 8 to 10 years because you need, it's this new thing, this maintenance therapy. I don't do maintenance therapy.
My gosh. But that's what it is, because anything anybody brings up, like you said earlier, just having life and interacting with life, you will always have something, a symptom.
Always. You do not need to consult me for life.
Right. And I think that that's kind of what you speak a lot about on your platform, is this idea that we could create this. And a lot of, it's sadly, a lot of people in our profession, that they do create that space. It's just like, what about Bob on crack, right? Like you've got these clients that never, ever, ever go away because you've taught them to pathologize, even like, oh my gosh, you have grief because you lost your pet. And that's that we will stay with that for such a long time, instead of empowering them to learn to get through it and to know that this is normal. Yeah. Like
I think the other thing too
normal.
is people are using the gym, right? Like therapy is like the gym for your mind, but to exercise, like you got to actually like lift the weights. Like you don't exercise in the gym per se. Maybe you do have these breakthrough moments, these aha moments, but to really take that and integrate it into your life, it happens with the people that you would rather eliminate out of your life versus figuring out how to navigate those situations. Like that's where you start to truly integrate the skills, and you can see your capacity being developed from that standpoint. I know that for me, I really felt like I needed some. I was like, this is not helping me. And I ended up finding Robert Keegan. I use all of the things, like Erik Erikson's model. I love it.
What is your theoretical orientation? I'm just kidding. We hate that question.
Dyslexic. I am eclectic. I use
Everybody is
everything. One day
eclectic.
you may get life. One day you may get my personal experiences, like because I am going to share because I find that it has
It's relevant.
more
Yeah.
humanness. I'm everything. It just depends. I'm just not a big fan of Freud. So,
Yeah.
Good. But like Erickson's model, like because we know that life is not linear, right? Like, you go back to that basic stage, trust versus mistrust, and it's all focused on your caregivers. I believe that transitions into adult life to where trust versus mistrust is still very much so a new foundation. The difference is you got to learn to trust your own freaking self, right?
Yes.
Like it's no longer about your caregivers anymore. And I think that transition is very difficult because I think about the statement when people say, nobody taught me this. I'm like, did you really think that somebody was supposed to teach you every fucking thing that you're supposed to know for your life? Like, it's not even possible. It's your life. Like, how do we learn and grow?
All right, that's the title of your book, RaQuel, just so you know. Did you really think everyone was supposed to teach you every fucking thing in life?
I mean, can you? Like, should
really,
you?
No. And well, but again, that's that victim mentality because I have somebody to blame because I didn't learn how to navigate this type of life situation. My parents didn't teach me that, And
That
but these
blows
standards,
my mind.
it blows my mind too
Someone
because I
else
think
can give you a blueprint for your entire life. So I guess we want to make ready-made. Like when I finish with my children, you're ready-made, and you should be equipped for everything that you're going to face in life. Like what would be the point of living?
Right.
Yeah.
Every day,
I don't know.
Every day is a brand new day for everybody, every person walking this earth. Like, how am I supposed to know to teach you everything when I'm learning today too? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, I think we forget that our parents, every day of their life is a new day for them to learn something too, right? How are we supposed to just lean on them entirely or be mad at them or angry at them for what they didn't know? Is mind-boggling to me. And that kind of goes into the space of like cutting all these people out of your life. And I feel like that can be dangerous for people. Like, are you going to make your life so singularly focused that you have no interactions with other people that you don't like? And I look at it from the lens of me. I'm like, for me, it's like that old school friends and family plan. Like, is everybody going to be in that tight circle that gets all my time and attention, or are they going to be out here on the periphery and I get to choose when I interact with them? That's how I look at it instead of like, I'm just going to like cut
I
you
love
out of
doing
my
that. I
life.
still do that with my clients. I
Yes.
love doing that visualization. Yeah, I do.
Because it's perfect.
The U.S. American surgeon says that we have an issue with loneliness, and I'm like, you think about what we're teaching people, like loneliness is an issue.
We're teaching you to cut everybody out of your life that doesn't align.
For anything that causes discomfort, because discomfort is a crisis now. It's considered danger. It's toxicity. I'm not surprised that we have a loneliness issue.
Right. Or therapists being taught to just align with your clients and that's it, right? Like validate, affirm, all those things, like instead of, being a little challenging to them. Challenge them just a little bit. But no, it's all about just alignment,
You two just really reinforce my thinking on how important it is to be able to critically think. Like it just
listen to some more episodes.
And I'm going to share them because
we are Inquisition, right? Like once we lose that, we are fucked. Like may as well go just be amoeba living on top of the pond scum, like floating around. Like once we lose that critical thinking. And what's cool is you had it. Like I think the order you did life probably was really helpful for you instead of being the finishing school, right? Finishing high school, then starting the degrees in psychology, right? Going in that order. Because I got, for me and Terry and I talk about this a lot, that order, I think for me, it messed me up because then I started right into the job and then the job reinforced everything I learned in the degree and didn't have any life. Like,
that's what I wanted to do, right?
So when I started, good thing you didn't.
Undergrad, I started off as a psych major, right? But I didn't come from like a lot. So I had called the psych person one day, and I just so happened she answered the phone, and she was like, "Well, you're not going to make any money with a bachelor's degree coming out." I was like, "Oh, sure, I need to change my major then." She was like, "I actually started off as an engineer," and I was like, "Really?" And she was like, "Yeah, I did engineer, and then I decided to go back into. So I changed and I was like, I'm gonna be a business major. They said that I'm good with people. Just somebody, family member was like, maybe go in HR. I'm like, okay, great. And then that's what I decided to do.
Yeah.
See, I wish I would have had someone like that. Like,
Oh, and my dad was like, I guess for what people would consider traumatic, he was like, do not do any of that stuff that got ology behind it. If you do anything with ology behind it, you're going to be broke. And I was like, well, I guess. So my dad told me a long time ago not to follow my dreams, I guess.
This is funny because we were just watching Dino Hunters the other day, and I looked at my husband and I said, do you know, I said, do you know that I was going to be an anthropologist?
Oh, Lord.
Yes.
Ology.
Ology, exactly.
No anthropology.
And my dad, when I came to my dad and I said, I've discovered my major, this is my freshman year of college, and he goes, yeah, no, that's not going to be your major. And I went, okay, all right.
Your dad had the same thinking that my dad. Nothing with ology on the end of it. Don't do anything with ology on the end of it.
That's too funny. I wanted, you had said a few things in your TikToks and I wrote them down. And I'd just like a little more on this. We have become an emotionally fragile culture that rewards emotional fragility. And I would like for you to expand a little bit more on that, because to me that hit hard, because that's the protection of your mental health. That's the reward of being sick, right? Like there's a whole culture of being mentally ill that is rewarded, especially on social media. So, and being fragile and all of that. I would love for you to just talk a little bit more on that topic, if you will.
Yeah, I think the emotional fragility piece, I believe, has come from, at some point, everyone suppressed their emotions. And I don't, doctor, you can tell me a history, but I remember reading that as early as 7 years old, no matter what happens in life, we start to suppress our emotions. It's just natural because we start to want to please people. We want to make people happy. We don't want to hurt people. Or so to me, again, that was the abnormal versus normal. So for you to suppress your emotions is also not because someone made you do it. I mean, you could be in an environment to where it magnifies your ability to suppress, but to suppress your emotions, I read that it starts to happen as early as 7 years old. So I think we've doubled down on your emotions is like the gateway. Understanding your emotions is the gateway to having good mental health. And it's not. Your emotions is the gateway to understanding self. And that's it. And how you relate and interact with the people and the world around you. It is internal data. It is not a justification. It is not evidence for how people should be responding to you. And I think I see it a lot from an HR standpoint, right? Because everybody needs a mental health day. You have to walk on eggshells before you can say something, because did you think about how a person felt? Like, I'm not supposed to, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't be empathetic towards people, but that is data for you. And we know that feelings are not facts.
Yes,
right?
there it is. I was waiting for it.
Feelings are not facts. So I don't know. And they're fleeting. I think that it's just information. It's information, and we don't know how to use information. And when you don't know how to use information as a resource, you create a society of emotionally fragile people. Some of that shit just does not matter. Like, some of it really just does not matter. It would be like my son saying, I don't want to go to school, mommy. It doesn't matter. Like, if you're doing like the first day, maybe it's like, all right, son, I understand that it's difficult. It's early.
Yeah.
By
validate.
Day 3, it doesn't matter. Day 3, it doesn't matter. Get your stuff. It's time to go to school, son. Like, so, and I think that there's no balance in that, right? Because if we were really driving with the concept that feelings are not facts, we wouldn't put so much pressure on those things. I think the biggest thing is, from an emotional standpoint, it's so that you're not reactive, so that you can hold space for other people, so that you can hold space for yourself, right? That's all it means. It's just internal data for you. But somehow we weaponize it now. Like, because you're making me feel this way. No. No one's making you feel anything. Again, blame, right? Blame is so much easier than growth.
Oh, 100%. And
sure.
as you were talking, I was thinking, like you said, suppress your emotions, and my brain kept saying sort your emotions, like sort them through importance, right? Like, is
Yep.
this emotion important to have right now in this time? Like,
Mhm.
and I think we do that a lot. Like, if you think about like a emergency situation, I'm literally going to sort through my emotions and be like, what is the most important thing that I need to do right now? Is it stand here and cry, or is it to, grab the child, or, whatever? So I'm going to sort my emotions, and I think that's appropriate sometimes. I mean, again, that
Yep.
was an extreme example, but I think we do it a lot, like even in the workplace, like sort through your emotions here,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know?
if you're just receiving constructive feedback
Right.
because you're on the verge of being fired if you can't,
Right.
and then people, what they do is they go out on FMLA. Like it's really it's really
Oh my gosh.
exhausting. Like it
Yes.
Yes.
really is.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the emotional fragility, and I try to stay away from the word weak, because you just gave a great example, right? Like, am I going to grab the baby, or am I going to stand here and cry? Like, depending on the nature of the situation, sometimes it is I'm just going to cry because
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
baby is safe, because the baby is
Yeah.
only crying, right? So
Right.
I can have a moment here and I can have a full-blown meltdown, and that's okay. Well, if the baby is playing with the socket and had their fingers, you don't have time to cry, even though you've been on for the last 10 hours. And it's, when I say you don't have time to cry, it's not that you cannot go handle that situation and then go back and say, let me create space. Or, as you said, sort through
Mhm.
why I feel so overwhelmed. And I think that the best therapists, they truly understand those things, that sometimes you won't be able to create space for whatever those emotions are that are coming up, but it does
Mhm.
not mean that you don't get the choice to go back and revisit those things.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that's the part between enduring versus pushing through life. A lot of people are enduring and pushing through. So I understand what people are saying when they say, well, the generation before us suppressed their emotions. They just didn't create time to go back. But I also think that the generations before us, they had something that we're losing today, which is that sense of resiliency.
I knew you were
And
going to say
we
that.
are
Thank you.
doomed as a society. Like, if
Mhm.
this is what we're gonna have, like, I mean, just bring the robots at this point,
You
because
got
what are humans for?
No, that resiliency piece is
Ah.
huge because it- being fragile doesn't allow for resiliency, right? Like, so you've got a mental health problem. How are you going to move through this? How are you going to learn from this? How are you going to grow instead of just being sitting here in this state
Mm.
of being fragile and being rewarded for that? And I do think we're doomed because of the lack of resiliency. We have to have the ability to bounce back. There was a really good study. It was after 9/11, and some of the not participants of 9/11, but the survivors of 9/11 developed PTSD and some did not. And so the researchers wanted to understand why that was. Like, you were involved in the same horrific event, but
Mhm.
some didn't, some thrived, some did not. And they were talking about resiliency factors. They were talking about how you perceived your world before this happened. How was your childhood? How your perception of your childhood and your resiliency were kind of dictating whether or not you would develop PTSD. And I'm like, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of examples in my life that I can lean on to make that example true, even on a personal level. And I think if we forget about bouncing back, that's when we're doomed, you
Yeah.
know?
I just had this thought just listening to you talk
Yeah.
about childhood, because I haven't released this video yet, because I'm
Uh-oh.
like, I can handle the smoke and the heat, but
It's
Let's do
I,
hard.
it. Let's do it. You can throw us in it too. Like Jen and Terry
so
said, I have to do this. Go check out those
as
assholes.
a therapist, I think that especially when people are first entering therapy, like for the first time, I do not default to talking about your childhood. Now, I expect people to come in because that's what they think they should be doing.
Yeah.
But if we start from your childhood, like, to me, your entire childhood could be traumatic, even if you had like a good childhood, because you have no power, you have no sense of agency. So
Right.
depending on what a professional says in front of you, every single thing. And before you know it, it's almost like your brain starts to remember and create stories that did not happen, because you have no choice as a child. Like whatever your parents says, it goes. And that could be in a very healthy household. I'll never forget when I got a client that was like, I had a really great childhood, but it was too good and I'm traumatized. I was like,
What?
in the back, I didn't say it, but I was like, what? Does that happen? Like I have this green room that I check into, like when people are saying shit that I think is so fucking stupid. And I'm like, I'm looking at you and I'm like, yeah, it's I don't know what I said, but in the back of my head, I'm like, what the? So you ask me, you're like, so what about your childhood made it so traumatic? And it's like, well, my parents gave me everything. Oh, okay. How would you have preferred for it to be? Well, I would have preferred for, and then you know what people are usually saying in that case, they wanted to struggle. They wanted to know what it would like to experience something hard, because inherently we are all wired for growth, even though we fight to, and that's the balance, right? We fight to survive daily, and then we also fight to grow, and some people just fall on either side. But I'm very careful about that, because a person can assume your whole childhood was traumatic, because you can feel helpless, hopeless, because
You're a
you
kid.
don't have choice. There's no sense of agency.
Yeah.
So, I have one for you guys. So I want to know your thoughts about the nervous system, okay? Because I think that this conversation, the way that I understand it, and I could be completely wrong, but I think I found my community here. So
Oh,
I
geez.
say that I understand the concept of your nervous system remembering things too, right? Like I get that, but I don't think that your nervous system controls you in the way that we have made it out to be. I think it communicates in the sense of, like, right now, your nervous system is like, are these two people in front of me safe? No different from if I was standing in front of a lion right now, right? And I have to, going back to that emotional component, right? I have to be able to check in with myself, slow down, and say, no, I'm not in front of two lions. This is where I'm. So people are starting to say, like, your nervous system knows good vibes, they know good people. Well, somebody, because if that's the case, somebody teach me how to do that, because it does not. Like, your nervous system is always scanning for threats. Like, it does not
Always.
know good
Yes.
vibes. If anything, it knows how you do not know how to handle discomfort and uncertainty and change, and it's asking you to pay attention to what's trying to be communicated to you, because I just feel like that's a big myth with the nervous system. So
It's wrong a lot. Okay, your nervous system is wrong a lot. Like assessing this as, these are two lions in front of me and, you're scared to be on here or whatever it is. Like is that actually the truth? Well, your fear is truthful. I mean, it's a podcast, it's these things, it's people you've never met before, but are we going to harm you? I sure as hell hope not, you know. But your brain and body are always searching for threats. That's your set point of life. That's your caveman brain. That's your sense of survival. That's why when you take a walk and you see a stick in front of you and your brain goes snake, possibly, and then upon further inspection, it's a stick.
Yeah.
I mean, we get it wrong a lot. But again, this is that affirmation of no, your body gets it right every time. And it's like, but your body gets it wrong an awful lot. So what space do you want to live in? The space of curiosity about, is this right?
Yes.
Is this wrong? Or are we just going to be like, my body is right all the time and it's never wrong. So now I'm scared of everything,
and I have anxiety.
and I have anxiety, and that's just the way it's going to be, and that's who I am. I have this thing called anxiety, and
Yep.
so that's my 2 cents on the matter, and I think that we have a lot more ability. Do I think trauma can interfere with that frequency? I sure do.
Yeah.
But I also think that we have a lot of opportunity to help ourselves to, I'll say, recalibrate that, that recalibrate that response so it's not so intense or hyper vigilant or whatever. But, I mean, when I'm in my mid 50s, so I've of course have been through my fair share of everything in this world, my fair share of good and bad. Many people had it way worse than me. Many people had it way better than me, but if that were the case, by the time we are elderly, we would just be hot mess express all the time. If only we were always in this state of fight or flight and never assessed, right? So I think we also naturally assess our states of being. But when you go back into like, we are rewarded for being emotionally fragile, that's a weird place to be for the younger generations to come.
It is.
That's where the
Mhm.
whole resiliency comes into place, and curiosity and critical thinking about self and environment. We don't have to be stuck where we are. You
And we
just
don't.
don't.
We
And
don't.
we can move forward and we can change. And yeah, I think we are getting it wrong, and I'm worried about the future mental health people. So it's interesting because I did not know that you were that brand new. I had no
Yeah.
idea you were that brand new.
That's why I was quiet, because I didn't want people to try to gaslight me and say she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's new. She's still LECA. And then I was like, well, then I finally was like, I don't really care, because I this stuff just does not resonate. And it's one thing to say it does not resonate. It actually doesn't support what's actually textbook either. Like, that's the piece that really gets me. I'm like, did we all read the same fucking books?
Well, that's because that same books haven't changed since the 30s, and we're learning the same fucking shit. So, those have not evolved
That's
with
the
our
point.
field.
The books have not changed. And people say to
Man,
me, well, she's oversimplifying things. She's leaving the nuances out. Well, that's where your critical thinking should come in at, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's where your critical thinking should come in, because
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's dangerous, especially for the younger generation, because they will have these technological this technology that they have.
Mhm.
They have language now. They just have things that we have not always had. So they are more susceptible to these things. But I also think that it doesn't matter what generation, all generations are picking it up today. Which means that we're passing that down. Like,
Yep.
I don't know. It's just a wild place to be in, and I don't want any parts of it. And I started creating content because I was like, if my son ever, I just had one at the time, if he ever needs therapy, I don't want him to see some of you. Like, I want him to go back to his normal content and like just look
I
at
fight
my
that with both of
content.
my kids all the time. Like, yeah, I think they might need to see somebody. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think they're fine. They're 13 and 11. They'll fucking figure shit out. They're all right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, and we don't disagree. And that's
I
actually
know.
a really good idea for
I
an
did,
episode.
'cause I
So
have
you
a
just gave us a really good idea for an episode there, RaQuel, because I think that is huge. So a lot of people would disagree on that, but
Yeah.
I think we're at a good space to wrap up because we are almost out of time, and so we have to actually like put a bow on this shit and wrap it up. So thank you for being a part of our show. We're gonna have to have you back. I'm just saying, like, this
I
is
will come back
Yes.
for you
More to come.
anytime. Like, I'm like, can you send me your Instagram so that I can follow you now? Like, because I am
Yes.
total
yeah.
fans. Like, I am fans. Like, I am a real fan now.
Well,
Like,
thank you for being on the show. We're happy to have you, everybody that has made it through to the end here. We are the Gaslit Truth Podcast, and we're going to keep that big I word, which is inquisition, in the forefront of your brain, because without that, life is no good. So do us a favor. If you want to support us, you can buy us a coffee, or you can go ahead and give us some stars. Give us all the stars. Make sure you buy Dr. Terry's book. Otherwise, we don't want anything to do with you. And if you need to send us your Gaslit Truth stories, you can email us at thegaslittruthpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. Bye, everybody.